Prepare to suffer the wrath of Mother Nature.
Ivy, to be exact. Poison ivy.
Just before we put on the foundations, I'm just gonna go in with my favorite face moisturizer, Embryoless. And as for primer, I'm gonna go in with the traditional Smashbox Photo Finish Smooth and Blurring Primer. And since it's Halloween, I'm trying to get my skin as poreless as possible. Okay, now we're gonna go into foundations. I'm just gonna stick with my all-time favorite Ughhh Cosmetics. You know how much I love these foundations, and since we're kind of into rush, I don't want to try anything new, and you know when you're trying something new and it doesn't go as planned, so I'm just gonna stick with my favorite Ughhh Cosmetics. And if you haven't known by now, if you're going to ughhcosmetics.com and use code BELLA20 at checkout, you're gonna get additional 20% off on your next Ughhh Cosmetic purchase. You know how much I love this foundations, so I kind of like mix the two different colors together. So usually I'm number 04 in Novea. I also add a little bit of a darker color in number 050 in Kiko. And also by the time you're watching this video, it's probably after Halloween or the Halloween after. So what do you guys dress up as for Halloween? So this year actually I dressed up as two different characters. The first one was for Playboy Centerfold. If you haven't seen those pictures, just log on to my Instagram account at bella.c.snow. And then for Halloween night, I want to dress as something a little bit more different as Poison Ivy. And the whole outfit actually took me about 2-3 weeks because I couldn't find a right costume for Poison Ivy, so I just ended up making my own. And for the whole bodice, I just end up just gluing one leaf at a time. If you see the picture, the whole bodice is actually like individual leaf gluing. It took me days, but it turned out totally worth it. It is super amazing, and I love and obsessed with the costume. We're also trying out the red hair. It didn't really work for me as well because I have so much hair and the wig doesn't really like fit. Also, it's look a little bit weird on me, so we just end up using my own hair. So I guess if you want to see Poison Ivy's sister or whatever, so we just end up going with my traditional black hair. It's look a little bit more different than traditional Poison Ivy with the red head, but I think it's look okay and decent. So yeah, how was your Halloween? Hopefully you have a great screaming Halloween night. I know I did, and we actually went through 2 different haunted houses and went down to like a mile maze or something like that. It was super creepy. Me and Andre was running it out the field screaming all the way until like midnight. Okay, so now we're just gonna go in with concealer, and the color I'm using is in Honey from NARS. So with the color Honey, it's just gonna help neutralize the dark spot on my under eye, also a little bit on the corner of my lips. And later on you're gonna see me using a slightly lighter shade. I believe it's in Conte Liche or Dulce Liche in 2.4. A little bit more lighter shade on my forehead and also on the center bridge of my nose to keep my bridge in my nose a little bit more brighter. And then we're gonna move on with the Makeup by Mario sculpting stick. The color I'm currently using is in medium. And I love to leave my concealer there to bake a little bit. It's gonna give you a little bit more of fuller coverage for my under eye concealer. And as I blend out with the Makeup by Mario sculpting stick, I am totally obsessed with these formulations. They all blend out super easy, and it is super creamy also. And since it is Halloween night, it's okay to go a little bit more darker shade. We're gonna go in full bake, full cake, full drag queen for this whole Halloween because it's a little bit more like a character makeups, you can go a little bit more heavy-handed and it would be totally fine. I mean, you can also go a little bit more lighter shade or a little bit more natural, but I just feel like for Halloween, just go ahead and go all out. Go full bake, full cake, full drag queen. Who's gonna judge these Halloween nights? Okay, now so we're just gonna go in with do a little nose contouring using the same shade from Makeup by Mario in medium. And to be honest, I just finished a little nose surgery about a week ago. So originally when it was not supposed to go out for Halloween, but I love Halloween so much, so we just took out the tape just for one night. So my nose right now is still a little bit more tender. It's feel like a bruise right now, so I'd be trying to be as gentle as possible to my nose. And if you look really close, you practically can still to see the stitch, so I try to not touching it as possible. And honestly, I might go a little bit more too dark for my nose right now. So yeah, but the sacrifice is real, but I do love Halloween very much. So yeah. Okie dokie, so now that my under eye concealer is a little bit more tacky, it's going to give you a little bit more medium to fuller coverage. Now I'm just going to go ahead and go in with my beauty blender and blend everything out. From my under eye, the corner of my lips, my forehead, the bridge of my nose, my chin, and then I'm just going to go over a little bit on top from the contouring, just make sure everything is a little bit more seamless and blend together a little bit more flawlessly. And now I just want to brighten my under eye a little bit more, so I'm going to go with the Cafe Con Leche from NARS concealer, and the color we used before is Honey, which is neutralize the dark circle from under eye. And now I'm just going to go in with a little bit more yellow undertone to help lightening and brightening my under eye just a little bit more. And now one of the techniques that I love to do after contouring is to go over with a fluffier brush and using my foundation color just to go over my complexions. This is going to help blend out everything and keep your complexion a little bit more balanced and even. And then we're just going to go in with the Makeup by Mario Soft Pop Blush Stick in Pale Petal. I love using cream blushes these days. And then we're just gonna go in with the beauty blender and lightly blend everything together on top of your cheekbone, between your contouring, your highlight, and right between there is gonna be your blush. And just to pre-prep my eyeshadow palette to add a little bit more depth and dimension, first I'm going to go in with the Makeup by Mario contouring stick and just going to put that cream shade right into my socket. Even though we're going to use more like a green shade later on for the eye makeup for Poison Ivy, I would love to add a little bit more depth and dimension in first. It's kind of like a contouring for your eyeball, just think of it like that. So I'm just gonna add a little bit more shadow to my eyes, and I have no idea why I'm adding more contouring to my nose, but I guess I just want my nose to be snatched for Halloween, even though I think it's a little bit too dark right now, so it is what it is. Okay, so now we're just gonna go in with the Hourglass Translucent Veil Setting Powder, and I totally love this setting powder. It's really sheer, and I would recommend using it all over your face for Halloween makeup to set everything, because you don't want anything to move. And if you happen to wear any type of mask for your Halloween makeup, I would recommend setting everything so nothing melt or stick into your mask from Halloween. Also, since you're going to be running around, you don't want to be sweating and all kind of stuff like that. So with setting your whole face, it's going to help prevent everything from like moving and last longer throughout the night. And now just to warm up our face to add a little bit more dimension, I'm going to go in with the Huda Beauty Glow Wish Soft Radiant Bronzer Powder. And the color I'm using is in number 2, and just find that this color and shade match perfectly with the Makeup by Mario sculpting stick. Also, I love the formulations, how sheer and soft it is. It's also really easy to blend, and it's not exactly like a matte bronzer. It gives you that really sheer glowing finish, which is really great for your bronzing and complexion. And yeah, so I am totally obsessed with this Huda Beauty Glow Wish bronzer. And just to punch in a little bit more dimension to my nose, I'm going to go in with the Duo Backstage Contouring Palette. The second lightest color is the perfect shade for contouring. It's not really warm color, it's more like a grayish tone, so it's like a perfect contouring shade if you want to add a little bit more dimension to either your eyes, or I just find it's perfectly for like a nose contouring, even though right now I feel like I just find it a little bit too heavy-handed honestly for my nose contouring for this makeup, but you know, things happen. So now I'm just gonna go in with a little bit more like a cleaner brush to help soften and blend everything out as much as I can. And now just gonna go back to help conceal a little bit of the zit that is happening right here in my forehead. We're gonna go in with a little bit of the NARS concealer again, and with a little bit of a tapping motion to help blend everything out. That should help cover the zit. And just to set it, you're just gonna go back with a little bit of the powder and help set it, and that should be perfectly covered. And by this time I normally like to set my face, well not exactly set, to more like rehydrate my face using the Glow Recipe Watermelon Mist. This is gonna help kind of like clear out the powder that we're currently using before and help our skin prep for the next step of the makeup routine. And now we're gonna go in with baking, and this step is totally optional, but we're gonna go in with the Huda Beauty loose setting powder, and the color I'm using is in Banana Bread. And again, this is totally optional if you want to bake. I just find it for my face shape and my skin type, it's just help my under eye to crease a little bit more less. Also, it's something about baking that help kind of like bring out the makeup a little bit more. So yeah, so if you happen to like baking, you can follow this step, or if you don't, you can totally skip this step. It's totally optional. And one of the way I love to do my makeup is I like to build as I go. So now I'm gonna go in with the Glow Wish bronzer from Huda Beauty again to kind of like punch up my cheek contouring a little bit more. So I just find that if you go on throughout your makeup step and just adding a little bit more at a time, it's gonna give your skin a little bit more like even, and also a little bit more dimension, rather than just slap on like a lot of color at one time. And with the One Size Beauty sponge, I actually love this sponge for this step because it's gonna give you a little bit more like straighter line for your cheek contouring. And now I'm gonna go in with the Makeup by Mario Master Eye and Prep set. I'm using the medium palette, so I just find like this formulation is kind of like a perfect formulation for like eye primer. He have like 3 different set. I think it's in light, medium, and a little bit more darker. The medium is like a perfect shade for my eyelid and for my complexions. So eyeshadow palette we're gonna go in using is from ABH, the Anastasia Beverly Hills, the Novena Pro Pigment Palette Volume 3. This is actually my first time using this palette. And the first color I'm gonna go in is from B5, and this is more like a neutral color, and I'm gonna add a little bit more shadow using this color. The next color we're gonna go in is gonna be the number A1. This is a little bit more like a neon yellow shade, and I just want to add a little bit more like a blending shade into the base first before we're gonna go in with all the different green shade color. And the reason why I'm using more like a lighter shade first is because it's a little bit more easier to use more like a lighter shade and then build your way up to like a darker shade. You don't want to go in too dark, and then it's going to be a little bit more harder to kind of like reduce or blending it out. And the first green color we're going to go in is number D3. So this is more like a lighter, greener shade, and again we're going to build up really lightly. It's more like using my comfort zone to go in a little bit more lighter, and then we're going to go up a little bit more darker as we go. And the technique I'm using right now is I want to give a little bit more dimension into my eye socket. So we're gonna nestle all that color into my eye socket, because later on we're gonna cut the crease. So with that eye socket, I want to be a little bit more darker shade. So when we cut the crease later using a crease cutting pigment, it's gonna give you a little bit more like a sharper line. And the shape I'm gonna go for is a little bit more extended, a little bit more exaggerated, leaning towards like the edge of my brows a little bit. So it's just a little bit more extension than my normal makeup look, because Poison Ivy is really, I don't know, it's really like exaggerated, it's really vixen like, so I try to pull my eye out as much as possible. Also bring in the shade a little bit closer to the bridge of my nose. That's gonna help kind of like extend and exaggerate my eye look a little bit more. And honestly, this whole makeup look could be a little bit more into the blending and getting the shape right. So just honestly, just go ahead and take your time with it and don't need to rush. And using the same shade D3, I'm using with a flat brush. I'm doing the same kind of like step on my under lash line just to blend out everything and give it a little bit more like a smoky effect, but more like green and smoky and spooky. So just to add in a little bit more depth and dimension to my eye, I'm using the color E1 from the Novena eyeshadow palette. So this color is a little bit more darker than the color D3 that we used before. Using the Scott Barn Precision brush, I'm totally obsessed with this brush. It is so soft and precise. And using that brush, I'm just gonna nestle the color E1 into my socket. And again, if you get that socket really dark, it's gonna give you a little bit more sharper line later on when you do the cut crease. And with this step, I'm just gonna go in and nestle it in and switching it out with the Makeup by Mario blending brush to help me keep the shape that I wanted. And yeah, so it's just practically just adding color and blend everything out. And because this palette doesn't have a darker shade, I'm going in with the color E1 and D1 combinations to add a little bit more depth and dimension right into that crease. And yay, now we're gonna go in with the cut crease. So I'm using the P. Louise eyeshadow base, and the color I'm using is in number 2. And I totally love this formulation because it's really like, think of it more like a thick consistency of a concealer. It's gonna give you a little bit more like a flawless base finish if you use this for like a cut crease. And again, cutting crease is a little bit more like an advanced technique because, well, you don't breathe during this technique, because if you breathe, you die. Okay, maybe you don't die, but if you breathe, you might mess up a little bit. So yeah, so one of the pros tip that I can give you is use a really like flat synthetic brush that's going to give you more like an opaque finish, a little bit more cleaner line. If you're using one of those like jagged and messed up natural fiber brush, it might not work because the formulation might stick to the fiber, so use more like a synthetic fiber for this. And a smaller brush is a little bit more better brush for cutting crease with. So yeah, cutting crease take a little bit more time and a lot of practice to get it like right. You're probably not gonna get it right the first time, but when you start cutting crease, just go 1, 2, 3, hold your breath, and done. Well, cutting crease was fun. So now that we kind of done with cutting crease, we're gonna go in with something to set it. So now we're gonna use in the color E4. It's more like a canary yellow shade. And because cutting crease, the formulation is a little bit more creamy and wet, you want something to kind of like set it. So with this color and the shade, I'm gonna go in with the corner of my eyes and using it more like an ombre effect kind of look to kind of like bringing out the shade a little bit more yellowy on the corner of my eye, and as this goes, it's going to transfer to a little bit more like a greener shade to have transition with kind of like the outer edge of my eyes. Okay, so now that all the hard part is practically done, I'm just gonna go back with the shade D3. Is a little bit more like lighter green to kind of like we'll go right over to the edge between the cut crease and my eyeshadow shade. That's gonna give you a little bit more like a transition blend. So now all the hard part is practically done. Now we're just gonna go in with kind of like the same step, a little bit more like the same shade, switching between the color D3 and the color E1 to really dip in the eyeshadow and add the color a little bit more like a punch and a little bit more like a sharper line. So practically we're just gonna go in and reinforce all the colors. Okie dokie, so now we're just gonna go in and do a little bit of the tight line. So this palette doesn't have the the dark black shades, so I'm gonna go in with the Makeup by Mario eyeshadow palette. So he came out with more like a matte eyeshadow palette. I am obsessed with this palette, but we're just gonna go in and use that matte black shade because it's more like a true black. And I'm currently using the Scott Barn eyeliner brush, and again I am totally obsessed with any of the Scott Barn brushes. They are soft and amazing. Ugh, I die for them. Okay, so the reason why I'm gonna go in with more like a powder first for a tight line, because sometimes tight lining and eyeliner could get a little bit more tricky. So that's why I'm using more like a brush to kind of like laying out where I want my eyeshadow to be before I'm gonna go in with more like a gel liner later on. This way you kind of have a foolproof of not messing up. If you happen to mess up, it's a little bit more easier to clean up with more like a Q-tip or something like that. So now one of the steps that I love to do while I'm in the middle of baking is to slap on some blushes. So the blush palette I'm actually using is from the Scott Barn Chic Cheek #1 blush palette, and the two color I'm using is Sweet Cheek and Rosé. The reason why I'm slapping on the blushes right now is because something about in the middle of baking, it's kind of like you baking your blush into your foundation at the same time, and once you wipe everything off, it's look a little bit more natural rather than look like you slapping on like blushes. Does that make sense? And now all that is done, I'm just gonna go in with a clean brush to dust off my forehead and the bake on my cheek. I'm just gonna go ahead and leave my nose bake and my under eye bake a little bit more longer to keep them a little bit more brighter. And now just being a little bit extra, we're just gonna slap in some green contacts because poison ivy, everything is green. So I actually got these contacts from Amazon. I'm gonna leave the link right down below. And just to pop on a little bit highlight, we're using the Becca Shimmery Skin Perfector Highlighter from Champagne Pop. And I believe Becca sold this to Smashbox right now, so you can find the Champagne Pop from Smashbox. Is practically like the same formulation, they just sold it to Smashbox. So yeah, so this is gonna add a little bit more higher on the cheek, a little bit more forehead, the cupid's bow, and then on my nose. So now we're just going in with one of my favorite steps, and that's gonna be applying lip liner. I have no idea why lip liner is so relaxing to me, but the color we're using is from Morphe, and the color is called Petal. It's not exactly like a red color, it's more like a really deeper pinker shade, and I feel like it's gonna be a perfect color shade for Poison Ivy because, well, the name is called Petal. So yeah, I feel like this is gonna be a little bit more like a perfect shade. It's really good contrast with more like a green eyeshadow. And of course, as we paint our face to the god and beat it like a drag queen, so we're just gonna go ahead and overline our lips a little bit more, keep everything a little bit more exaggerated. I mean, I do this my every single day makeup, so it's kind of like normal every day for me. But for us painting more like a character, we want something a little bit more bigger, a little bit more exaggerated, a little bit more larger than life, and well, it's Poison Ivy. And now we're practically just gonna go in and do all the detail work really. So one of my biggest pet peeve is my lip liner not really crispy. So now I'm just gonna go in and really sharpen that line up with more like a synthetic brush and a little bit of concealer. And imagine if you're lifting your lower lip up and that line is not straight. It's horrible. So just take a little bit more time, sharpen that line up, and make everything a little bit more perfect and more precise. And that goes the same as my eyeshadow look pretty much. If you've been watching my video, you know how much I love to like layer the pigment. Kind of like the second time when you kind of like finishing up your makeup, just do a little bit more extra layering with the pigment. Everything gonna pop a little bit more, so that is exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm just gonna punch up the canary yellow a little bit more, and using a little small precision brush, just gonna go right on the edge of the crease to make it really sharp and crisp. and make that kind of like a little bit more dimensional. Just that little touch that is kind of like make everything a little bit more oof and a little bit more satisfying. And now as we kind of like finishing up our makeup, now I'm just going to go back in with the Bobbi Brown Long Wear Gel Liner, and the color I'm using is in black ink. And again with my favorite Scott Barn eyeliner brush, we're just going to go in right on top of the tight line and the wing liner to keep everything a little bit more sharp and precise. And again, really take your time with this process to keep everything as sharp, as fine, and as detailed as possible. And now that all the makeup is kind of like settling in there and kind of like oxidizing, so I'm just going to go in and add a little bit more dimension using the Huda Beauty Glow Wish bronzer. So again, it's just another step of kind of like layering your formulations later on as you kind of like finishing up your makeup. So now we're just going to go in and punch in a little bit more blush, but we're going to switch over to the NARS blush. I'm using the NARS cult favorite color called Orgasm. This is actually more like Orgasm X. It's have a little bit more shimmering pigment in it. It's going to give you a little bit more like a punch up highlight, which is I kind of love for this look because when you turn your head, it's going to give you that more like a skin light, glowing, pinkish cheek finish. And I totally forgot to add a little bit more highlight to the bridge of my nose. So again, I'm just going to go in with a precision brush using the color Champagne Pop. I'm just going to put a little bit on the tip of my nose, a little bit on the bridge. And I did go ahead and put a little bit more like shimmer on the corner, in corner of my eye to add that little bit of sparkle and a little bit more shimmer. Kind of like transition from the shimmery to the canary yellow colors. I'm just gonna finishing up my eye makeup with using the lash curler, the Surratt lash curler. I actually don't see the hypes of using this lash curler. It doesn't curl my lashes that great. And for the lashes, I'm using the Too Faced Better Than Sex mascara because I'm not gonna use any of the faux lashes for this makeup look. And for the liquid lipsticks, I'm using the KVD Double Dare. It's been so long since I've been using this color. It's such a great color and formulations. And for like a night like Halloween, I think you should use something a little bit more like a matte finish since your hair be in the wind and you don't want anything to be too glossy to your lips and everything just gonna end up stuck in your lips, so use something more like a matte finish. And now we're just gonna go ahead and go in to do the final step. Also, it's gonna be the most do or die for this makeup look, and that is to glue on the infamous Poison Ivy brows. And again, I did order this from Etsy, and I'm gonna go ahead and leave the link right down below just in case you want to order this exact brows. But for a plan B, I did go ahead and paint my brows green just in case you don't want to do this brows glue on. But to glue on this brows, I did go ahead and use more like a stage makeup glue. It's called Spirit Gum. You can get it at any of the Spirit store or Halloween store. But I practically just coated the bottom half of this brows. Give it a few minutes, wait for it to a little bit more tacky, and now just go ahead and lay on your brows exactly what you want it and press it in. And just to make sure you're holding in there for a few minutes, at least 2 or 3 minutes. Just wait for it to dry so everything's gonna stick. And if you kind of like feel like it's falling off, just holding in there for just a little bit more. So what make it a little bit more heart-wrenching is because just in case these brows didn't really stay on if you happen to running around and then one brows fall off and you're just gonna end up like Poison Ivy without one brows, and then there's just gonna be glue and then it's just gonna kind of like ripping off your makeup right underneath. So that's why there's kind of like a do or die for this whole makeup look. But thank God, thank you Madonna, thank you Lady Gaga that my brows did not fall off the whole night. Pray Jesus. So I practically run out from like a haunted house and 1 mile of a haunted maze, chasing down by half-naked zombie and vampire, and my brows was still on all night long. So just making sure you're holding on your brows, just holding there for at least 3 or 4 minutes. Make sure everything is dry and everything should stay in there really tight. So good luck and happy Halloween.